Muske Andar heter jag och med mig har jag Dr. Suman Kanna Agarwal som har rest hit ända från Indien. Och det är Sofielunds Folkets hus som har bjudit hit henne. Vi ska låta henne berätta lite om sig själv. Hi Suman, it's a pleasure to have you here, and you have traveled here all the way from India. And you're a very well-known person, but many of our viewers might now not know anything about you. So would you please give a presentation of yourself?
Well, I'm a professor of philosophy in Delhi University. I have a PhD in Gandhian philosophy, so I'm a Gandhian scholar. Plus I've done some postdoctoral research projects in India, in Sweden, in Canada. I've written some books on Gandhi and written a lot in some journals, articles in journals, and also lecture a lot on Gandhian philosophy abroad. Normally I teach a course on Gandhi in the summer semesters in Canada or American universities or European.
Is it your first visit here to Sweden, or have you been here before?
Actually, I first came to Sweden in 1986 on a research project to study Gandhi's relevance to the peace movement in Scandinavia. So I was here for a year and a half, and ever since then, every October, Delhi University, we have an October autumn break from 1st to 15th October. So I'm normally back here to give some lectures in different forums with the peace groups or the university or even gymnasiums, wherever they, or folk high schools. So I think I must have been a Swede in my last life because it's almost 20 years now since I come to Sweden in October.
Okay. So the 2nd October is a big day. Can you tell us a bit more about it?
Yeah, October 2nd is Gandhi's birth anniversary. And last year it was declared the International Day for Non-Violence by the United Nations. So for Gandhian scholars and Gandhians and for all people who are working for peace and non-violence, it's a very significant day.
So what does it mean for people abroad, like in Europe? What kind of response do they show on the 2nd October?
Well, I think people remember the Gandhian legacy. And I think it's very empowering to remember Gandhi because he used non-violence in politics. So that is the beauty of Gandhi, the sheer integrity of the man. Because what was right in his personal life was also right in politics. And that's the greatness of Gandhi, that he showed us how to apply non-violence in politics. In other words, non-violence works in politics too. So I think October 2nd really would remind us how we can also successfully use non-violence in politics.
How long have you been working with questions regarding non-violence?
Well, ever since I did my PhD really, but now I'm working with one main question, and that is how to apply Gandhi's philosophy today. Gandhi is of course relevant in many spheres of life, but the most important place he's relevant is to Gandhi's legacy. I would say, if you can sum it up in one word, and that is non-violent conflict resolution. And today, all of us, all the adults living in democracies, we have politically legitimized violence as a means of conflict resolution, and we are very passionate about this. The global military expenditure is $2 million a minute. That means we are using $2 million every minute to teach how to use violence to resolve conflict. But we are not even spending $1 a minute teaching how to use non-violence to resolve conflict. So how can we expect it to succeed?
Yes. So how do you think people can work different countries to prevent violence and to work in a way which is more justice and more non-violent?
I think the need of the hour is that if we want to move forward as in the global village or as a society, as nations or in the world, is that we need to politically legitimize non-violence as a means of conflict resolution. So my Gandhian NGO, we have launched an international initiative for the political legitimization of non-violent conflict resolution through the introduction of non-violent defense in world systems, in military defense systems worldwide.
So what does this campaign mean? What does it mean?
We have 3 demands from all the governments all around the world and the United Nations. The first of these demands is that that we urge everybody that without abandoning the present military defense, a non-violent defense be instituted in all the defense systems. What this means is that right now, like every country has a defense ministry, Ministry of Defense. So we keep that, but along with the Ministry of Defense, every country starts a non-violence defense ministry or a peace ministry. And at the grassroots level, every country has a non-violence training, a military academy. Yes. Like you have West Point in the States. And of course, Sweden also has the military academies where you train how to go to war. Yes. Now, we keep that, but alongside that, every country, we are asking them to start a non-violence academy. And there's a blueprint of what will be taught there. Very briefly, there is 198 non-violent methods or tactics which will be taught. Then there's the history of non-violence. There are 24 cases from history which will be taught here. And in fact, in India, we have approached the Ministry of Education to put all these, to add a chapter in history books. Yes. Because history is not just war, it's also non-violence. Then non-violent communication will be taught, how we speak wolf and how to speak the giraffe language. Then the philosophy of non-violence, because let's say that Christians believe in the 10 commandments, yes. And 2 of them is thou shalt not kill, or thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. So what does this mean? How to translate this into political reality? And then we also want that every student after gymnasium all over the world would go to the Non-Violence Academy and study for 3 months, yes. Non-violent conflict resolution. As you know that we had, there was compulsory military service for 2 years, yes. In many parts of the world. So if we can have compulsory military service, why not compulsory 3 months non-violence training for a change?
You've been working to make changes in different ways, and you have also started organization, a non-governmental organization called Shanti Sahyog. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I just want to finish about the 2 other demands we have from the national governments. So the first one was to introduce non-violent defense. The second one is the legal option to be trained in non-violent defense rather than the present military system. And this means, let's take an example from my own country. A lot of young people join the army in my country to get a job. They want to earn a living. So there should be a legal option when you want to join the defense of your country. You can join, if you believe in war, join military defense. And if you believe in non-violence, then you join non-violent defense. Because non-violence also has to be learnt. It's a science according to Gandhi, so it has to be learnt and only then it can be applied. And the third demand is that the legal option for taxpayers to divert their defense tax from military defense to non-violent defense. Again, we are not saying that we don't want to pay our tax or our defense, or there should not be a defense. Of course you need a defense. It does not need to be military only. So there should be, the income tax returns or the declaration we file in every country. There should be 2 boxes. And you could tick mark military defense or non-violent defense. And as I just told you, that's $2 million a minute is the global military expenditure. So let's say if half the taxpayers all over the world sign up for non-violent defense, what would happen? You would still have $1 million being used for military defense, but $1 million would be diverted to set up non-violent defense. Because when you start something new, you need funds. So here you would have the funding to build a non-violence academy. You would have staff, library, books, research, non-violence R&D. So you would have the money for that. Yes. And by the way, this is a very legitimate, the legitimacy of this international initiative It comes from Article 18 of the United Nations Charter of Human Rights, which says that each individual has the right to freedom of conscience. So if my conscience does not allow me to kill, why force me? So people who believe in a violent way of resolving conflict can sign up for military defense. And people who believe in non-violence can sign up for non-violent defense. And also there is the preamble of the United Nations Charter, which says that we, the people of the United Nations, we formed this organization to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. Yes. So if we really don't want war in the future, then we should do something concrete about it. Just not hold international conferences, but let us introduce non-violent conflict resolution. Let's politically legitimize it. And then let's say if we start a non-violence academy today, who knows, 50 years or 100 years even. What is 50 years or 100 years in world history? It's nothing. That means by the time your grandchildren come along, they will know how to use non-violence. They would, right now we don't have the tools and the skills of non-violent conflict resolution. Then we would have it. So I think the need of the hour is that, and also it's a very modest demand. We are not saying that scrap the military or substitute the military with non-violent defense, not at all. We're just saying give non-violence a chance. Just introduce it. That's all.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to my question about Shanti Sahyog, the non-governmental organization. Can you talk about that, please?
Yeah, this is, that's the brochure of my organization. These are all the slum children you see on this, and there's a slum area we have adopted in, and that's the slum area we have adopted in Delhi. This is something like your institution, it's called Glocal, that you think global and act local. Yes. So in the same way, we also think global and we thought we should act local. So this we have adopted this slum area, which is very near our office, our NGO office. And it is, there are 816 families living there. So we have 3 projects there. Number 1, we send the slum children to school, regular school. So we get funding from individuals, from private agencies, from a lot of corporates. They give us money or funds under the CSR program. CSR stands for Corporate Social Responsibility. Yes. So then it costs about 1,000 rupees a month to send a child to school. Yes. The school we send the child, that means about 200 kroner a month. So we started, it was actually an experiment we made, and we sent 25 slum children to school 3 years ago, and they did so well. They even wanted to go to school on Sunday, because it was such a good thing for them to be there away from the slums. And they did so well that it was an eye-opener for me. There was no lack of talent in our country, only lack of opportunity. Yes. So that's one program. Then now since this year we have also started a nursery school, a kindergarten, yeah, for the slum children. And so the mothers can leave them between the age of 3 and 5, and we look after them. I have 47 children. I can't take more than 50 because my place is limited. So that's very good for the women. They work as maids or drivers or peons or, a very low salary, yes, and they're illiterate. So in fact, for the children we send to school, we pay for their admission fee, their school tuition, their private tuition, yes, because if you don't give them private coaching, they can't do their homework. And then we pay for their uniforms, their books. And apart from that, we have started a health center. It's a free health center for the slum women, for slum people. Every year we also have an eye camp, and that means we have a team of 10 doctors coming. And then on the spot, last year, for example, 400 people came from the slums, and 160 got glasses on the spot, yeah, and 10 cataract operations were done in the next week, all free. So it really helped them a lot. And then we had a camp for diabetes, yes, who are diabetic, and we could screen them. And when we get funds, we may have a camp for detection of breast cancer, yes, or also for bone density, osteoporosis for women. So these are our main projects. And the health center, in the morning it's a health center, in the afternoon it doubles up as a vocational center. So there we teach women how to become self-reliant. For example, we have tailoring classes, and they learn to stitch, and then we market what they make, and it goes rather well.
The sponsors, are they national, or do you have sponsors from other countries as well?
No, we have national and international. We have something called an FCRA regulation, which my NGO has, and it's called the Foreign Contribution Regulatory Act. So under that, foreigners can also contribute, because unless you have this permission from the government, you can't take money from foreigners. But now we have that, so a lot of my Swedish friends, they are paying for the education of one child. In fact, I'm going to ask a local gymnasium or folk high school to maybe sponsor the education of 5 children or whatever they want to. Yeah, so we have financial donors also, I mean, internationally.
Dr. Suman, how did you get inspired to study the Ghanaian philosophy university?
Well, I have a confession to make. I wasn't really interested in Gandhi in the beginning. So when I did my master's, I had to do my PhD. So I wanted to do my PhD in an Indian topic, because I wanted to always lecture abroad and teach, teach abroad. So it's no fun to do a PhD in Marx and come and lecture in Germany about Marx, So then I wanted to do my PhD actually on the letter Om. Om, it's a symbol of meditation. The letter Om is very significant. But for that I would have to study Sanskrit. And unfortunately I went to a boarding school where I learnt French and not Sanskrit. So it was too much to first learn Sanskrit. I couldn't wait, for 2 years. So then I chose Gandhi because it was an Indian subject. But I must say that once I started studying Gandhi, I got very interested, and Gandhi does something to you. So I can't say I'm Gandhian, but I'm definitely a Gandhian scholar. Very difficult to be a Gandhian. So then I got interested, and in teaching Gandhi, in applying Gandhi, and gradually, also adopted the slum area, because Gandhi says poverty is the worst form of violence. So I felt I must do something. It's my give back time to society, I have got a lot from the world and I must give something back.
War in different countries, like for example in Chile and in other countries in Latin America, there are conflicts. Also in Afghanistan, which is very near India. Why does this war occur? Why do we have war?
I think the basic cause of war is, as I told you before, that there's a conflict, okay? It's a conflict area. But there are 2 ways of resolving conflict, because conflict in itself, according to Gandhi, is not the problem, There will always be conflict. It's a difference of opinion or a clash of interest resulting from that difference of opinion. So conflict is something very natural. It will always be there. And according to Gandhi, conflict is also neutral. There's nothing wrong with conflict. It's conflict resolution. And that means how do you handle a conflict? How do you resolve a conflict? You can either use violence or you can use non-violence. When you use violence, it becomes bad. When you use non-violence, it becomes good. So even these conflict areas, as I told you, it boils down again to learning non-violent tactics, learning how to use non-violence. I think we have spent so much of money through the years, past 100 years, perfecting the science of violence. We have nuclear weapons now. But we have not perfected the science of non-violence. So maybe the time has come to do that. And so I think it's important in that way.
Yeah, we should end the war in a good way, in a non-violence way. So I hope everyone can adapt non-violence way in their life, non-violence resolution, as it is called.
Yeah, and I think a very good day is to make your resolution would be tomorrow, which is October 2nd, and Gandhi's birthday, and also the International Day for Non-Violence. Yes. Yeah.
We're very thankful to have you here with us in our studio. Is there any message that you want to leave or send for our viewers?
Well, I think I can give you a quotation from Gandhi where he says that it is a sign of spiritual atrophy. That means your soul is stuck, a sign of spiritual atrophy to support an unjust structure like war. And then he goes on to say, you may not be able to change the system at once, but you can always choose not to cooperate with it at once. So my message to your viewers would be that do not cooperate with war or the war system by working for non-violent defense, by choosing non-violent defense, and in doing so, make history the way Gandhi did.
Thank you very much. It was a very big pleasure having you here. Thank you very much, Dr. Suman.
Thank you. Thank you. It was good to be here.